So we just finished talking about or defining the unemployment rate amongst other labor market statistics. And the particular unemployment rate that we figured out is actually referred to as technically U3, which is, again, number of unemployed people divided by the labor force. Now, some people have complained that that's not a true measure of joblessness in the economy, and so they've developed different measures that account for different levels of joblessness. So if you take people who would like a job but are discouraged and are no longer searching for work, they're technically not in the labor force, and we have a name for that group. We call them discouraged workers. Now, in terms of the nomenclature, this is a little confusing to me, because if you're not working, why do we call you workers? Discouraged workers sound like people who don't like their jobs, but in fact, it's people who are not working and are not looking for work because they're discouraged. So these people are not in the labor force, meaning they're not looking for work and they don't have a job because they are discouraged about their job prospects. About job prospects. Okay, so this is a group that you could reasonably think maybe we should count in the unemployment rate. These are people who would typically be searching, but perhaps they just gave up after failed searches after a certain period of time. So we have an unemployment rate to account for these people called U4, and we take the number of people who are typically unemployed, and we just add this group of discouraged workers. And we just add them in both the numerator and the denominator. So we take that divided by the labor force plus the discouraged workers. And again, you wanted a percent, you multiply by 100. So that's a little more general version of the unemployment rate. And if we take a look here, I've plotted the regular unemployment rate that we calculated. So down here, in this portion of the graph down here, we're at the 3.6 or 3.7%. And when you add discouraged workers, it's not too terribly higher, about 0.1% higher. So the number of discouraged workers isn't that high relative to the number of unemployed people. And so, that depends on the economic situation. So if you look at the gap between the two lines was quite a bit higher following this recession in 2007 to 2009, where the unemployment rate was very high and it was difficult to find a job. There were many more workers that were discouraged. So the U4 unemployment rate was about a percentage point higher in that period of time. So it'll be interesting to see in the next several months when the unemployment rate gets high as a result of this coronavirus crisis, pandemic, what happens to this U4 relative to our normal U3 unemployment rate. So if we go on, you can kind of keep going in this same direction, and we could take from U4, we could add another group of people that are marginally attached workers. Now, marginally attached workers are people, again, who are not in the labor force. They're not looking, but they're able and available to work. So this marginally attached workers are not in the labor force, but they're able and available to work. So we call them marginally attached because they're somewhat attached to the labor market. Oh, sorry, you can't see me see it over my picture there. So not in the labor force, able and available. To work. And that's the group of marginally attached workers. And so we're going to follow the same direction. We're going to add that group to the numerator and denominator of U4. And that's going to get us, this green line here in our graph. So you go from the red line is U3, the regular unemployment rate we've looked at. The blue line is U4. And this green line is what we call U5, which includes both discouraged workers and the people that are marginally attached. And so now we're starting to get a little bit higher, almost a percentage point higher down here, somewhere around the 4.5% of people are either unemployed, discouraged, or marginally attached to the labor force. So there's one more that we can look at. And if we kind of go to that, we can add the people that are underemployed. Now, this is something we talked about previously. And when we add underemployed, this is people that are working part-time, but would prefer to work full-time. So you're working part-time, but want full-time. So you're working part-time for economic reasons, I think, is what they typically have. And so on top of discouraged and the marginally attached, we add this group that's working part-time but wants a full-time job. And there we get a much bigger jump in the rate. So you notice at the end of this last recession, so we're likely to see something very similar to this in the coming months, probably a much larger scale. Look at how wide the gap was between these different unemployment rates. So it was, pretty close to 17% of the people that were in the labor force were either unemployed or underemployed. So they had a part-time job but wanted full-time. And so that's come down quite a bit. It's under 7% right now. So there's not a huge number of people that are part-time for economic reasons, but that's likely to change in the next set of months. So that sort of concludes our discussion here of the unemployment rate and a number of different aspects and a little bit of a look at the data to see where we are currently. And so what I'd like you to do is to go onto Canvas, and there's a question there that's posted on Learning Objective 1 that will kind of help you review some of the stuff we've learned. And there's a solution posted, and so you can see where you're at. And if you're missing parts of knowledge, come back, rewatch the videos, rework some of the problems, and move on